Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Integrative Behavioral Couple Therapy, a therapist's guide to creating acceptance and change, 2nd edition, by Andrew Christensen, Brian Doss, and Neil S. Jacobson. Narrated by Mike Lenz. Publisher's note: this audiobook refers to figures, appendices, and tables included in the print and ebook editions of the book. Preface. It has been almost 25 years since Andrew Christensen and the late Neil Jacobson wrote the first edition of this treatment manual for Integrative Behavioral Couple Therapy. Many developments in IBCT have happened during that time, which more than justify a revision. The most important developments for a clinically oriented book such as this one is that we have done extensive dissemination of IBCT, and that dissemination has forced us to elaborate IBCT in a way that makes it more accessible to clinicians and couples alike. IBCT is a principle-based treatment for couples. As such, it does not provide treatment recipes, step-by-step procedures for each session, or elaborate flowcharts or decision trees about what to do and when. Soon after we had written the original treatment manual, a colleague read it and complimented us on the book, but asked, "Do you also have a treatment manual to go with it?" He was a proponent of detailed treatment manuals that specified what therapist behavior was appropriate at each step of treatment, and thought there must be a companion volume that did this. We had to inform him that this was indeed our treatment manual. Because this original treatment manual was so principle-based, our first clinical trials involved extensive supervision of therapists. Therapists did video recordings of each session. Christensen and Jacobson watched some or all of these videotapes and consulted with therapists, and sometimes each other, prior to each session. As a result, we were able to clarify for therapists how to implement these principles across a wide variety of couples. Based on the positive results from these clinical trials, the United States Department of Veterans Affairs selected IBCT as one of its evidence-based treatments for couples. Starting in 2010, Christensen has been heavily involved in training therapists in the VA in IBCT. As of this writing, over 500 licensed mental health professionals have entered the VA's extensive training program in IBCT, which involves a several-day workshop and at least 6 months of weekly supervision as the trainee does IBCT with 2 or more couples and gets feedback on audio recordings of at least 20 sessions with these couples. As with our supervision of the clinical trials, this training effort required us to articulate and illustrate in detail how to apply the principles of IBCT with couples. Starting in 2009, Doss led a major effort to adapt IBCT principles into an online program for couples, OurRelationship.com. In this effort, the principles were concretized with text, animations, video illustrations, and interactive material, in which participants answered questions and got feedback from the program and were guided by the program in a series of conversations with their partner. As with the clinical trials and dissemination through the VA, this effort required that we articulate how the principles would be applied in diverse situations. Therefore, in this revised version of our book on IBCT, we have maintained the fundamental principles of IBCT, but have elaborated them in greater detail, and included a wealth of examples that should make it easier for the clinician to understand not just the principles, but the diverse ways in which they can be applied. About 2/3 of the material in this book is new. If our colleague reads this version, perhaps he will not have the same question he had before. In the last 25 years, there has also been extensive applied research on IBCT. The appendix lists all of the current publications resulting from this research. The clinical trials, the dissemination effort through the VA, and the online program have all led to published research on IBCT. Although this is a book primarily for clinicians, we will summarize that research briefly at points in the book to show not just that IBCT leads to beneficial outcomes for couples, but also to document how it brings about those outcomes and how important subgroups benefit from IBCT. For example, minority couples, affair couples, couples with some level of intimate partner violence. We also briefly review some of the basic research that supports particular interventions in IBCT, such as empathic joining, and unified detachment. Throughout the book, we illustrate our points by referring to specific couples. We typically mention these couples by name. In many cases, these are composites of the couples we have seen directly or indirectly through our work in therapy, training, supervision, and research. However, we selected these composites as typical examples of the kinds of couples and kinds of issues that present themselves in couple therapy. For these couples, we often describe how an IBCT therapist might work with them. At other times, we not only describe specific couples and their behavior, but also what an IBCT therapist actually said or did with them. At still other times in the book, we describe couples at length and include transcripts of some of their therapy sessions, along with our commentary about the couple and the therapist. In both of these later cases, in which we say what an IBCT therapist did or provide extensive transcripts of the session showing what he or she did, we are referring to specific, real couples. However, we have anonymized these couples to protect their actual identity without sacrificing the clinical reality of the couple. The transcripts are verbatim what the couple and the therapist said, albeit with some minor changes to remove identifying information and increase understanding. Some of these cases are from the original book and some are new. Some come from our clinical trials and some from our own work with couples or our training of other therapists who work with couples. Our commentary on these transcripts discusses what the therapist did that was good, as well as the mistakes the therapist made, as we believe it is helpful to see positive examples of IBCT as well as missed opportunities or mistakes in IBCT. We have not mentioned the names of the specific therapists in order to further protect the couple's identity and also the therapist's identities. We start off the book in Chapter 1 with a detailed picture of one composite couple, Hank and Maria. We will visit them throughout the book, showing how IBCT would conceptualize their difficulties and how IBCT might work with them. Part 1. Overview of Couple Distress and Therapy. 1. A couple in distress. Let's consider the story of one couple, Hank and Maria, their personal history, their relationship history, their first session of couple therapy, and the multiple challenges that they present to a couple therapist. A focus on this couple will provide an introduction to couple therapy, and in particular to integrative behavioral couple therapy. However, the story of one couple is really two stories. Each partner has a separate story to tell that usually differs substantially from the story that the other tells. Maria's story. Ever since James, our first and so far only child, was born a little over 4 years ago, our marriage has gone downhill. James was a difficult baby, very fussy, a poor sleeper, easily aroused and upset. I found it exhausting taking care of him. It seems like I never got a good night's sleep the first couple of years of his life. Hank was of no help to me and actually made things worse. He wanted me not to comfort James so much and let him cry it out. So not only did he not help me out, but also he criticized me for a lot of what I did for James. When James was around 2 years old, I realized he was not developing properly because he was not speaking much, usually just one-word sentences. I couldn't share my concerns with Hank because he would tell me I was overreacting and that I was coddling James too much. So he directly and indirectly blamed me for James' problems. I took James to several pediatricians and psychologists. All agreed that he is delayed. His language development is clearly below normal. Also, it's clear that he has behavior problems. He tantrums a lot, in part because he cannot communicate his needs and desires and gets frustrated. He doesn't play well with other kids and will take their toys or be aggressive with them. But he can also be very sweet and loving, particularly to me. No one can agree on a diagnosis for him or whether he should be diagnosed. He is in a special preschool program. I just want to give him as much help as possible so he can develop to his full potential, whatever that turns out to be. Hank doesn't think much of the mental health profession, and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?